Hello, everybody. Welcome to our live recording of the Young Screenwriters Podcast. Today, we're going to talk about Fallout, the TV show, which I'm super excited about. And we will get into that in just a moment. We want to give folks a little bit of time to trickle in. Um, so, obviously, I'm here with a special guest today,
Hello.
the one and only Carlos. Um,
I get my time in the sun.
yep.
Here I am.
And everyone knows you need more time in the sun. But this is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I freaking loved this show. We're still working through the series. Um, oh no. Okay, where have I done this? One second. I have a window open where I'm talking. God, I
Nope.
hate that. I saved the day
Now
I closed it.
now's the time to fix it.
I know. That's why we do soft launches now. But yeah, this is going to be fun. I have a lot to say about this one.
I just think it's an incredible adaptation of something that I think a lot of people avoided for like TV for a while.
Yeah,
For a lot of reasons.
I'm glad that we're more that it seems like people are more willing to sort of I mean, maybe I should save thoughts for the
Yeah.
podcast and stuff,
Yeah,
but
for sure.
yeah. Maybe let's just go ahead and go live. I feel like we're ready. All
Yeah.
right, let's do it. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Young Screenwriters Podcast. I'm Alexie, and I'm here today with Carl, and we are discussing the pilot episode of the new Fallout TV show on Amazon. So, just very quick background that you probably already know. Fallout is an adaptation of a video game series, and this new series is made by Jonathan Nolan or has Jonathan Nolan attached to it. And yeah, it's on Amazon Prime streaming, and I am very excited to talk about it. Um, and Carl,
Yes.
you played a lot of the games,
Well,
right?
first, let me just say hello to all of our listeners and to everyone who's popping in here live. I'm very happy to be here. I think this adaptation and this TV show from Amazon is just a success. Like, Alexi, I don't know if you've kind of looked at other people's reviews of this TV show, but like, I think everyone can agree, like, this is good. Like, this is good TV, especially in an age where there's a lot of adaptations and a lot of interesting creative choices with said adaptations. Um, but I think they got it right with Fallout. And as a fan of the games, I'm happy to say that and happy to see it because Fallout as a world is really, really weird.
Yeah. I think something that's kind of interesting is that, there's truth of like what's happening in Hollywood right now, which is that people are really nervous about original content and want to do adaptations more and more. And we often talk about how that can be kind of frustrating as a writer, but honestly, one of the plus sides is that that means that material that has been historically people have been scared of, people producers and studios are getting more excited about adapting. So like if
Mhm.
it has a big audience, they'll take on something huge like Fallout, or Arcane was taking on League of Legends and like these other video game things. We saw a Barbie adaptation. There are these adaptations that are different than the traditional adaptations you might see, like just
Mhm.
book to screen. And I think that that is a plus side of producers and studios' fear of original content, and I don't normally think about that side of it, so it's
Yeah, yeah.
kind of fun.
No, I get what you mean because with this TV show, and like when we're gonna dive into the pilot, I believe.
Mhm.
I kind of like share the beats of that pilot and like why it's really good. But the thing you're speaking to about like using an IP but telling an original story within said IP, is like maybe a good route to go for like honoring kind of what an adaptation is. And with Fallout, like this story that we follow with Lucy McLean, or is it's McLean or McLean? I don't know.
McLean. She says it
McLean, yeah.
McLean. Yeah. Yeah.
It's not a story in the games. And I think that actually helps it, because any kind of like direct, like book to screen adaptations, uh, you've got a lot more room for just, I think, making people unhappy, maybe. And it's also just way trickier than just like being able to tell your own story. Uh, and with that, yeah. So I'm here, one, because I love Young Screenwriters, and hello everyone. But also, unlike Alexie, I've played all of the video games. So like I'm very, very familiar with this IP.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, Alexie, what exactly would you like me to share? Like what kind of questions do you have?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I watch the show as someone who has occasionally seen you play the games, but has never really played, and so my understanding of the game is pretty limited. My knowledge of it was, "Oh, apocalyptic world, shoot things." Was kind of my understanding. And then
Yep.
is this the game where where you can technically beat the game without ever shooting anyone or something? And, like, that's a special achievement? So, like, there's really my understanding of it is that there's a lot
Hmm.
of ways to play and a lot of
There
ways to
is.
navigate the world. Is that
Uh, there
accurate?
is absolutely. That's kind of like a Fallout IP staple, is that there are so many different ways to engage with the world. And that's true for all the games. Uh, the extreme example you brought up was like never shooting a shot, or like going through a game that's technically a shooter, not killing anyone, is only possible in Fallout New Vegas, which we can talk about later. Um, but what the Fallout IP does is it allows players to approach a story in a world in a number of different ways. And that's done through like building out your character in the kind of build you want and giving the player that control. Which I think what happens in this story is they kind of lean into that a little bit, and they give everybody, they shared online everybody's stats if it was a game, what it would be. And so Lucy's stats is she has very high perception and kind of like is mediocre in everything else, which totally fits. Um, but yeah, that is what the Fallout games kind of is. It gives players a lot of agency about who they bring through the story. And then there's a ton of player choice.
Yeah. I think that that's interesting because
Mhm.
my understanding of you know, I kinda wanna go ahead and do the pilot breakdown just so we can start
Good.
talking about the specifics. So,
Yeah.
before I get to this thought, let's go ahead and do the pilot breakdown really quick.
All right.
So, all Carl, you can feel free to kinda jump in, but just to kick it off, our opening image is a lasso, right? It's just a
Well,
lasso in the
our
sky.
opening image is the end,
Okay, that is a title card.
which is pretty on, yeah, is pretty
Yeah.
on point.
And then we see the lasso, and basically we are on what is essentially the day not essentially, we are on the day that the bombs fell and that we went into a complete, like, nuclear war. So, it's, like, very 50s vibes, even though it doesn't actually take place in the 50s, it's very 50s vibes, and we are at a birthday party hanging out with this cowboy and his daughter. Clearly there's some, like, class disparity, there's something happening, like, where the dads at this party are making fun of our cowboy, and we understand that he's kind of, for whatever reason, in a situation where he is down on his luck and maybe fell from glory in some way. We get the impression that maybe he was, like, famous before, or there was something going on before. And very quickly into this party, it's 5 minutes into the pilot episode, his daughter sees a mushroom cloud over the city, and I believe that they're in California at this point in
Yeah.
time. She sees this mushroom cloud over the city, and it blows out the windows at this party. everybody starts running. There's this crazy shot where we just see more bombs falling on the city behind them, just like boom, boom, boom. It is very intense. Like I was surprised. For some reason, I'm still always surprised when imagery can hit as hard as it does because I always feel like, we've been kind of desensitized to these things through just having a lot of graphic media. But watching that moment where they were running from the first bomb and then there's more falling in the background, I was just like, geez,
Yeah, yeah.
wow. It was
I think
very evocative.
one aspect of this that I think helps really ground it for us, the viewer, is that it happens at a birthday party, right?
Mhm.
And throughout that birthday party, the parents are telling like the dads or the kids, like, no, we're focusing on the birthday party.
Yeah.
So there's always like a little news clip in the background, like on a little TV, where some anchor is saying, like, why do I have to give weather about next week? There might not be a next week. And then the TV gets shut off. And so it really grounds you in like what the stakes are in that moment. But we're at a birthday party and there's a cowboy. Uh, and then when the bombs hit, like it you really feel it.
Yeah, I agree. And then it was like, I mean, something that I agree with is I was hearing somebody else speak about how in this world of Fallout, they show you a
Mm,
bunch of different factions throughout the show, throughout the pilot even. So we're not going to get into spoilers about later, but they show you a bunch of
mhm.
different factions and they show you how each one kind of has a point, but is also kind of like problematic. And it's interesting to see this party of like clearly well-to-do people choosing to actively ignore the situation until bombs are literally falling on their city and then they're fighting over access to the bomb shelters. It's just like, dude, did you really not think that this was going to hit your own backyard? But it was
And
it
it literally did hit their
it
backyard.
it did. And so that's 5 minutes into the movie. So 5 minutes into the movie, we understand the exposition of this world, which, is and they did it by attacking with exposition, right? It
Mhm.
wasn't like a crawl, like Star Wars style of like, in the year 2076 or whatever it was, 'cause it was slightly future. The bombs fell, blah, 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 blah. Instead, they show us the scene from a party and, we get to see the bombs fall in real time, which is such a good example of making exposition a problem for your character in the present. So I loved that choice. But yeah, and then right after that, we cut to Lucy McLean, who is in the process of trying to apply to get married. And we understand that essentially she's been living in a vault. We've jumped like 200 years into the future. She's been living in a vault and she wants to leave her vault to go to a nearby vault to get married. And she's
Right.
filling out this application and we get to see that she's talented in these different areas, like that she can casually do like judo and that she says she's a bad shot and is a
But she's
very good
clearly, yeah,
shot.
she's clearly not a
Like
bad shot.
and yeah, and then she gets accepted. And so now we're on the path of Lucy's initial objective for this pilot is she wants to get married. Like that's what she wants to do. Um
Yep, she wants to get married to someone who isn't her cousin, which
yeah,
is a very good goal to have, I think, for all of us.
you know, we all do our very best in this world to not marry our
Especially when you're
cousins.
stuck in the vault, because that's one thing this establishes right off the bat after the end, and the title scene. We are inside the vault, which is this iconic location in Fallout, and I think they captured how quirky and weird it is. And as we go through Lucy's goal to get married, it still gets more and more quirky.
Yeah.
Um,
I was trying to think about if it would legitimately be that hard to not date your cousin if you've been in a vault for like if people have been in a vault for like 250 years. And I guess
so,
like
well, let's continue with breaking down the pilot, which from Lucy wanting to get married and her marriage application gets approved. Um, they arrange it to happen. And you see them getting ready for said wedding. One lovely detail that's in this, which I think is just an excellent choice, is they've got crops within the vault, and there's a projector, which is going to be important in a second, where you see, like, I think it's of Nebraska, like just country. And it's beautiful, it's serene, it's peaceful. It is kind of like the American dream in like quotes. But then as you approach kind of the wedding, and we're introduced to this other vault, Vault 32. So the intrigue is building up, like, oh, these vaults are connected. This answers your question, Alexie. Maybe it's not hard not to marry your cousin because there's other vaults nearby. And then her cousin is like, I love you, and it's tragic, and it's, wonderfully strange. And they open it up, and they meet the other vault dwellers, and the groom to be.
Yep. And those vault dwellers are weird. And a good thing to note about our vault, about Vault 33, is that very quickly we get the idea that this is like a very utopia vault. Like people are very cheerful and pleasant. And it's like her catchphrase is like okie dokie, like she's very like
Gun ho.
yeah,
Yeah.
gung ho. She's very cheerful, and it seems like that's the vibe of their vault. And then when we meet Vault 32, they're super rough around the edges, and Vault 33 is just kind of like grinning and bearing it, kind of a thing. Like, what is with these people, but trying to be polite. And yeah, they're just like rough around the edges. They're like annihilating the food. They seem to be more beat up than Vault 33. All these red flags, and Lucy takes her new husband back to their room. They have their moment, and afterwards, we start hearing some stuff going on outside. Um, in this moment, she ends up pulling out her Pip Boy, which Carl has. Uh, yes, Carl got a Pip Boy.
I
Um,
thought if there was ever a time to put this on camera or to tell our podcast listeners, uh, yeah, it's a fun prop, and it's a iconic thing of Fallout, and I think they nailed it too.
Yeah, I agree. And so she gets out her Pip Boy, aims it at her husband, and is like, "Oh my god, you're radioactive. You're a surface dweller. Like, this is not right." And from that moment forward, it's just complete chaos. Um, and Carl, you pointed out about Norm, who's her brother, who is kind of like apathetic to most things, but is also really curious. He wandered into Vault 32 as this was happening and saw that all their crops are dead, which is connecting back to the crops that we saw flourishing in Vault 33.
Right.
Vault 32 is destroyed. Crops are dead. Everybody's dead. There's dead people laying around. There's blood on the walls. Clearly, something went very, very wrong. And as these two realizations happen with Lucy's brother Norm and with Lucy and the radio, like realizing that her husband's radioactive, everything hits the fan. And we
Mhm.
are in a very gory, very intense fight from that moment forward. So,
Right. And it's a classic, like, Raiders versus Vault Dwellers. And as we continue on through the pilot from there, like, Lucy, she kicks some ass. Like, it's brutal, but we see Lucy actually, like, those skills that she mentioned before come up. So nothing was arbitrary there whatsoever. Um, and then as Lucy's kicking ass, uh, we run into her dad, and we run into kind of like this series antagonist, which is Moldaver. I think it's Moldaver.
I think it's
M-
Moldova.
Well,
Let me double check before I commit to that. Moldave. No, you were right. Moldaver. Yeah, you were right. Yeah.
and we see this interesting choice that she puts on Lucy's dad, which is choose her or choose basically the vault. And he picks Lucy.
Yeah, and I will say there's some vibes there, like, where it's implied that this woman, Moldaver, knows something about the dad that we don't, and is kind
Oh,
of like
yeah.
forcing him into this ethical situation, kind of knowing that he's going to choose wrong, and we don't understand why. But we know that there's something happening here that feels personal or feels like they know something, and so that happens right at our midpoint of this pilot episode. And something that we talk about in writing the pilot is how a lot of times the way pilot episodes are structured is that you have your own inciting incident for the episode, which, it's Lucy, she's going to get married. She has her own objective to get a husband. But at the midpoint of the episode is when you get the inciting incident for the entire season, if not the entire series. And the midpoint of this episode, like pretty much dead center at like 32 minutes, is this moment where Moldaver gets away with Lucy's dad, and Lucy's dad is gone, has been taken by raiders. And that is her inciting incident, and it's what's going to propel her later in the episode into action. So it's just cool to always see it play out, like after you kind of realize, like, okay, about halfway through the pilot episode, every single time, that's the moment when the series is going to kick off. That's when the problem for the series or the season is going to really come into play. And here it's the dad getting kidnapped, and Lucy kind of panicking in the consequences. And I think right there is when her brother Norm is like, no one's going to go after him. Like, they want the power. He was the overseer of this entire vault. Why would they go after him when now they could have his spot? So really, we feel it coming down on Lucy as her inciting incident for this season.
Right. I I forget the exact order of things, but I think Lucy's dad is kidnapped, and then we see like an explosion, which basically just kind of blocks her from pursuing her dad and Moldaver even more. Um, but I think we cut to Maximus
Yeah.
before uh, we see the vault kind of recover. And Maximus is this fantastic like B plot that we get introduced to. If you want to speak more to that, Alexi.
Yeah, sure. So, right after the midpoint, that's when we cut away to our third character now. We've met Cowboy, we've met Lucy McLean, and now we're meeting Maximus. And Maximus is this young guy at a military esque organization on the surface. And we meet him when he's getting the crap kicked out of him, right? We meet him and we immediately understand kind of his position in the hierarchy here. He's way low down in the structure and he's not popular. He's getting the crap kicked out of him. And in that moment, we 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 understand that he aspires to be a member of this Brotherhood of Steel, but that he is severely lacking right now. He's not doing well in the school. He's not able to defend himself. He's very passionate, but he's lacking. And they need a new squire to go serve this knight Titus. And the one ally that he has in his corner, his one friend in this whole crappy military camp, is chosen to be the squire, which means the friend is going to leave. It's kind of like the friend is graduating. And it he's trying to be happy for his friend. Um, and we see his like admiration and kind of like his jealousy of like looking at these amazing armor suits that
Oh
they
yeah.
have. We understand his passion in life, like the thing that he really wants is to be one of these knights.
So it's established really early in the sequence. This is the Brotherhood of Steel, which is a classic faction within the Fallout world. And more so than that, we see like Alexei, we see him like get beat up in the beginning. He's going through this camp. He's not a good student. Like he's asked like, what kind of technology is this? And I think he says it's an air conditioner, but it's
He calls it I think he said it was a toaster or something.
or
Like,
something like
yeah.
that. And it's like, no, it's a circuit. And like, if you saw it, be honest with you, if some dude in robes came up to me and showed me a picture of a circuit, I don't know if I would say circuit. I would probably overthink it. Um, But but yeah.
Well,
Um
it's also a little bit of a joke from some of the, like, the Vault games. There's the Fallout games, and then the ones that I have played is this phone game where you're running your own vault, and when you send people out into the abyss to, collect junk, um, when they
right.
come back with their junk, it's all given these names of, like, an archaeologist trying to understand what it was, which reminds me of this thing that went viral, I don't remember when, but it was in the real world, and, like, some, like, archaeologists found this, like, really mysterious shape, like, it was about like, it could, like, fit in the palm of your hand, and it had, like, all these, like, points with, like, nubs on it, and it really looked like a, like, polyhedral alien thing, and everyone's like, "What is it?" And, like, coming up with all these, like, crazy backstories for it, and then you ask, like, a grandma who knows how to knit, and they're like, "No, that's, like, for holding your yarn." Right? So it's like, I think that it's kind of like that in the sense that in this world, we're so far removed from the past that there's kind of this joke that they don't know what the old technology does, and they kind of, not necessarily hype
Right.
it up, but they're just like, "Oh, it's this."
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, it certainly speaks to the state of the world.
Yeah.
Right off the bat, which is preserving the technology that once was, uh, is more important than maybe trying to just figure out how to survive, at least to the Brotherhood of Steel. So their ideals are laid out really plain and simply, in this wonderful way of showing not like showing us like what their values are instead of saying like we value this, which I'm pretty sure they do anyway, but they do this first. But here's a a key thing with Maximus's story beat right there, then and there, is during his schooling, his getting beat up, an airship comes in, which is the Predwin, and an established thing in the games. So it's not exactly fan service because it pushes the plot forward. Because when they show up, the knights show up, and that's when they need squires, and his friend gets promoted, and then his friend gets sabotaged, and then at the end of that, and we're not really sure what happened to the friend because the friend was picked, like you were saying, Lexi. But then, as the story continues, uh, and we see that the friend was sabotaged, Maximus gets taken because he is accused of sabotaging said friend, which
Yeah.
is an interesting thing because you see him go through all this stuff, and
Yeah,
you're like,
party yeah,
he probably did it.
yeah, you start wondering if he did. His best friend goes to put their boots on, and there's been, like, razor blades put inside the boot, and their foot is so mangled that they're
Oh
not gonna be able to
man,
go. It is freaking brutal, and
absolutely.
he's immediately taken, and so that is his inciting incident
Yeah,
of this episode, right? That's his episode inciting incident is when this thing happens to his friend and he's getting pulled
yeah,
in. From that moment, we jump back to Lucy where we have her kinda call to action, where she decides, like, "Okay, I need to do something about the fact that my dad is missing. Nobody else is gonna do anything. I'm gonna do it. I need to leave this vault, and I need to go find him." So she has decided that, they used to believe that the surface was, I think, more uninhabitable than it really is. It's obviously still dangerous, but they seem to believe that it was very uninhabitable. She now understands that you can function up there, and that's where her dad is. And so she convinces her cousin lover and her brother to help her get out of this vault. And naturally, there's a lot of emotions involved. The cousin lover really doesn't want her to go. She drugs him and leaves, and as she's leaving, they get people come up and they see the fact that they're letting her out, and this is, like, a big controversy. So from that moment forward, had her inciting incident, she accepts the call, and then now she's moving out, um, with her call to action, she's breaking into her act 2 where she's gonna enter a new world. So that is her story, and then we go back to Maximus, who is being interrogated about whether he was the person who put the razor blades in his friend's boots. And in this moment, there's like a back and forth where he's just obviously terrified, but also completely
Yeah.
like he showcases his reverence for this. We really understand the depth of his passion and the fact that it plays into his backstory, that the Brotherhood of Steel seemed to have saved him or been involved in his life when he was young. I'm still not convinced it was a good thing. I feel like it was a little ominous, but we understand
It
that
definitely was.
yeah, but we understand that the Brotherhood of Steel meant something to him when he was young. And so we think that he's going to be completely screwed. And then as the interrogator is leaving, the interrogator is won over and is like, "Okay, fine, you'll be the squire then." So Maximus went from like bottom of the barrel to graduating in one big swoop because he impressed this one guy. And now he's on his mission to help Knight Titus find a man and his dog.
The target.
Yep, the target. And then we loop back to the beginning for our final sequence, which is another like short 5-minute sequence where these strange like grave robber guys are digging up a grave of the ghoul. So it's this like undead kind of zombie man that they dig up because they want his help tracking down a bounty, which is the same bounty that the Brotherhood of Steel is going after. And when the ghoul gets out of the ground, we realize it's our friend the cowboy. And he is not the same man that we knew before. He is clearly very jaded by this world. He is missing his nose. He is, he is completely the epitome of what it means to be living in this world. And also somehow he's still alive after 200 and something years. So clearly there's some screwiness going on. But that's where we leave off our episode is with him getting rid of these guys and he's going to go after the bounty as well.
Oh yeah. And the ghoul, the ghoul is such a wonderful character. That actor, Walton, I think his name is Walton Groggins.
I
Uh,
Let me see. Yep, Goggins.
Goggins, Walton
Mhm.
Goggins. Wow. One, I love that actor and like almost everything he does. And man, what a role! So perfect for him. And the interesting thing about that last sequence is it kind of establishes some of the world where you figure out like, oh, has he gotten full feral?
Yeah.
And you're
Yeah,
like, what's this? So there is like kind of a not quite magical side, but that you can tell this is the same guy because apparently this could happen to people who are irradiated. They become feral, they become ghouls, but sometimes they don't and they
yeah,
just live.
yeah.
Which gets revealed later on in the series too. So a lot of the questions that you brought up, Alexi, because I've watched most of the series. I also know how the series ends. Um,
No
you've only,
spoilers though.
yeah, you've only seen the pilot, which is pretty neat. It's the really funny thing, and I think this just speaks to your just like your story sense and your skills as a writer. But everything you've said was like, that's ominous. It's like, yeah. Like, yeah, you're picking up what they're laying down for sure. So like kudos to you. Like every single beat that leads to like a big reveal later. You're just like, that's gonna be a twist.
Well, that's good to
Uh
know.
so
That's funny.
congrats.
God, I'll tell you what the one twist that I was driving me the most crazy though was I was like, "Who is Norm?" And I was like, "Oh my god, he's Rico from Hannah Montana."
Oh
And
yeah.
that was the thing that drove me the most nuts over the whole course of it. I was like, "Why do I know this
So
man's face?"
it's funny you bring up kind of like other work our actors have done because the lovely actress who plays Lucy, whose name I can't remember at the top of my head, she
Ella
voiced
Purnell.
Ella Purnell. She voiced, I think the character in Arcane was the Joker.
No, I think that she was one of the leads in she was Jinx.
Jinx, that's who. Yeah,
Yeah.
she was a lead, so she's been involved in like video game adaptations that have been stellar. Now there's two.
Yeah.
Uh, so she's got quite the reputation, I'd say now. But just like, yeah, I was trying to place her voice throughout all of it.
Oh, yeah.
But I
That
think
was
Rico is more of a like, who is this
I was like,
guy?
"Wow, Hannah Montana really having a rough time out here."
Yeah,
He
yeah,
went I guess they could have even been in Malibu. They were in California,
true.
but
Well, they're in Hollywood.
oh, so it is Rico. How dare he?
Prob- so I so I'm here to give my perspective on video games. We've just gone through the pilot, which I think is kind of a wonderful example to study from in terms of like setting up your cast of characters and then tying them all together through a shared objective of sorts. Because in the pilot, Lucy's objective is to probably survive the wasteland and find her dad. Find her dad is number one. Maximus and the ghoul, they're finding the target. So like they're already like they're gonna collide for sure. Later in the series, Lucy's goal becomes to find the target or to kind of like use the target to get to her dad. Building up that kind of structure to me as kind of an amateur writer is phenomenal. Like
Yep. I mean,
I love how easy they made it look.
so one of the things that is actually very challenging that they have pulled off very well is the fact that you want your objectives to be we talk about this a lot, but you want them to be tangible, important, timely, and specific. And so in this case, it's not just that her objective is solely to survive in the wastes, or like it's not like, oh, I'm going to go out there and see what can be done. No, her objective is tangible. It's she wants to save her dad. So like when she reaches
Mhm.
her dad, he is a tangible person, then we can see her doing it. It's important. It's important to her. He's like her entire world, as we established in her opening montage of her entire life revolving around her dad. And he was the overseer of this entire vault.
Yeah.
It's timely because he's been taken by raiders and presumably will be killed or something bad will happen to him. And it's specific. It's not like, oh, the raiders have a bunch of captives and I want to save one so we can like get information. It's specific. It's her dad. And so this objective ticks all of those boxes, and I think that when it's done well like this, it seems easy, but it is actually one of the hardest things as a writer to make sure that you do, because
Right.
it gets so simple to be like, "Oh, well, she wants to, like, take down the raiders," which might tick a couple of those boxes. Like, yeah, it's important, I would say, um, but that's not timely. We don't know, like, before they do what. It's not specific. And then it's not even tangible. It's like, if we saw the still of her achieving that goal, we should understand that the goal has been achieved. Like, if we just saw the frame, right? When
Right.
she finds her dad, we could have a still of them together, of her with her dad, and understand her objective has been achieved. If her objective is just to take down the raiders, you could you could, like, kind of imply it, like, if she's, like, standing on top of, like, a pile of dead raiders, but, like, you wouldn't necessarily know that she has definitively reached her objective and that all the raiders
Right.
are gone and that it's she's done it from just the still. And so that's part of, like, the visual storytelling aspect, and that's why these types of objectives work so well for film and TV.
Yeah. Bouncing off of that, a staple in the Fallout world is you take something you think you understand and you twist it and you make it darker. And if in your mind, like when you think of a vault, if some like what's the sick and twisted version of that? Fallout in the games and just in the IP takes that and pushes it to the limit. And so with this like very clear objective, like a tangible objective, what they do with the series is they take this, and so in episode 1, it's super clear, right? It's very wholesome as well. And Lexi, at the end of the series, they've taken that and they've twisted it. They made it darker. And
Believe it.
the twist is insane. Well, it's not like crazy, like they build up to it. But it is
Yeah.
like, yeah, okay, this
Well,
absolutely fits the setting.
that's the marker of an ideal ending, is that you want something that feels surprising yet inevitable.
Yeah.
And that's a really hard balance to strike, but I think that, like, when you start analyzing your favorite twists and, like, your favorite films or your favorite TV shows, that tends to be kind of the secret sauce. It's like, "This surprised me, but now that I've seen it, it was inevitable. There was no other way that this could have played out." Um, and so I'm glad to hear that this one seems to deliver.
Oh,
Something that I
it
wanted to
really does.
Something I wanted to mention that I thought was interesting is just kinda talking about the idea of this being a video game adaptation, and this was the thing that I wanted to bring up before I said, "Actually, we should go through the pilot first,"
Okay.
is this idea that Fallout is a very open world game, like we mentioned. You get to make a lot of choices, and your choices actually matter. Like, you get to pick sides and, like, decide if entire, like, factions survive or fall. You get to choose, like, whose side of this thing you're on, and it's never simple. It's not just, like, binary
Mhm.
choices that tweak a small part of the ending. It's like it matters a lot. And so to a degree, I think part of the objections that I have seen from people who are very, very passionate about the games is that people have their own headcanon of how these things went because of the choices that they made as a player as they
Right.
were going through the game. And for a TV show, unless you're gonna do like a Bandersnatch, whatever it is, like choose your own adventure type TV show,
Mhm.
the writers ultimately have to choose, okay, what's canon? And one example of that was that big airship coming in with the knights of the Brotherhood of
The
Steel.
Brotherhood of Steel, yeah.
Apparently, in the game, there's an option to destroy that airship, and it should have happened in the timeline before this game. And so some people were, like, upset that the
Right.
airship was still there because their headcanon had it destroyed when they made the choices that they made in their playthrough. And I thought that that was really interesting, that it's like, understand both sides of it completely, and I think it's the marker of a good game that your choices feel like the inevitable choice, like, it feels like the correct choice that you were supposed to make because the world respects that choice so much, it's not like a tacked on thing, and so when you see other people make a different choice, you're like, the writers are making a different choice here, you're like, "What the heck? This is not what really happened." Like,
Right.
my playthrough was different, and I think that's a really cool element to see here.
Another aspect of kind of, because when you are dealing with an adaptation, you do have to kind of make those choices, right? And for video
Mhm.
games, that's freaking hard. Um, Another thing that pops up later is something gets mentioned like once, which is
Mhm.
like a nuclear bomb in Shady Sands. Um, and that is a settlement in Fallout New Vegas, which is a game developed by a studio but published by Bethesda. So Bethesda owns the IP and licensing for the Fallout world right now. They are the ones that made Fallout 3, Fallout 4, and Fallout 76. And Fallout Shelter, Alexi, which is a Fallout game that I know you've played.
Yeah, I play it on my
uh,
phone.
yeah, but Fallout New Vegas was a licensed game uh, developed by Obsidian Entertainment, and it's kind of heralded as the best Fallout game to
Yeah,
date.
what and, like, people were concerned, I think, that this was declaring New Vegas not canon, and the
Yeah,
director had to come out and be like, "No, no, 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 don't worry, we're not contradicting all
like
that."
news can travel like in weird ways. Also, I think like 10 years had elapsed
Mhm.
from when that game happened to when the events in the show happened. So like that's a lot of time. Like maybe someone did nuke New Vegas. I don't know.
Mm.
But it's an interesting thing because I think it's speaking to like kind of what you're saying is that when people play a video game, their choices are theirs. And for a game like Fallout, when choices really matter, it's really hard to pull it off, which is why I think they decided to go with an original story within the world and have it set in Hollywood, which is fantastic.
Yeah. I think that that's also part of the reason why they chose to do the multiple protagonist approach.
Hmm.
It's not uncommon at all by any means for TV shows to have like a cast of pivotal characters who at different times are the lead. I
Right.
would say that in this pilot, it feels very strongly that Lucy is like the core lead. I would be curious to see if we end up having like Maximus or the Ghoul take precedence in later episodes, but I think that that's a reason why they might have chosen to tell their story in different locations with different types of characters was kind
Hmm.
of to honor the different styles of play, like you said. Like, people have kinda written up, like, "Oh, these would be their stats," and
Oh,
stats are
I think
something.
they've straight up shared them.
Yeah, that's yeah, it's like, these would be their stats, and stats are something that is very personal to, like, the way that you play the game. You choose where your stats go,
Yeah.
and it's your play style, and so you have essentially 3 different characters who I don't believe would actually be playable. The only character who would be playable in the game would be Lucy because of, like, circumstance. I think you always start as, like, somebody venturing out into, like, a vault person.
Most of the time you do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
But overall, it's still like you get these archetypes of play styles through the different characters, and so it adds another layer to the reason why you would choose to focus on these different protagonists. Um, Obviously, the other reasons is just like in TV shows, we love to look at relationships. We love to look at how different people approach the same problem. The Ghoul and Maximus are going to be going after the same guy, and it'd be interesting to see how their paths are different. Um, and it's such a rich world that we wanna be able to get an insight into a few different factions. So they chose 3 groups. They chose a Vault Dweller, Brotherhood of Steel, and kind of like a rogue
yeah, like
wanderer. Yeah,
yeah, I would say that precisely that. A ghoulish wanderer.
yeah. And I think that that's part of what makes this version really work. If we look at the other video game adaptations that have worked lately, which I would say are Arcane and Last of Us, and then this one.
Mhm.
Last of Us, you don't make choices in that game really. Like, you just are kind of like going through and you're doing what Joel would do. There's no like branching plots, like you don't like choose things that really affect the outcome of the game. You're just going through the steps of what Joel did. And so the movie or the TV show is actually very, very loyal to that journey. We don't see
Right.
that much deviation from what the game was. Arcane was an adaptation of a game with very little story at all. Right? Like it was just kinda like these characters that fight, and then they chose to do this elaborate thing about the like, digging into the backstories of these characters and explaining how they got to the characters that you see in the game, but it was really whole cloth creating something
Right.
based on a very, like, fighty game. And then I'd say Fallout falls somewhere in the middle, where it's like, it's not necessarily that this plot line is the same one that you follow in the game, you don't, but these factions and these motivations are baked into the world already, and they have
Yeah.
just given us a specific objective to go after that puts everybody in the same timeline.
So I do want to say very quick, a lot of the Fallout games from Bethesda have your inciting incident going after like a family member. Uh,
Interesting.
so Fallout 3, let's start with 3. And I'll circle back to Fallout 1. I don't really know Fallout 2, so I won't bring that up. But Fallout 3, your dad goes into the wasteland. And when he does, like shit gets weird. And it turns out that he's trying to help save because that takes place in the DC area. he's trying to save the people there and bring like clean water to them. And so that's his mission. But you, as a player, you go out into this world looking for your dad.
Mm. Yeah.
In Fallout 4, you are the dad or the mom because somebody kidnaps your kid.
Oh, yeah, I
And
do
so
remember that from the intro
you
cutscene.
you leave from there. I don't know what the plot is for Fallout 76. I never played that. Um, but for the first Fallout game, it's very different. So, like, kind of the core Bethesda Fallout games tend to be, hey, someone in your family's gone, go get them. And
Very
the show
Liam
kind of,
Neeson.
yeah, more or less. And it's usually out of like necessity. Either
Mhm.
like you want to find your child because it's a baby and the person who took your child killed your partner, or you need to get your dad back to the vault to help fix things, or things like that. But for the first Fallout game, the tangible objective, which I really really like, is like going after a family member. Definitely tangible, very clear objective. You got to find them. You can kind of see like what the quest line is. Like you're going to be following their footsteps. For the first Fallout game, it was to find a water chip because something in the vault that you were in that was responsible for cleaning water for the entire vault to survive becomes broken. So
Mm.
you have to go out into the wasteland and basically find a new water chip in the wasteland. And so it's a little bit more open ended.
Yeah,
There's like
'cause it's
a
not a
hint.
specific water chip, right?
I don't think it is. I think you
It's
get
like you just
hints.
need a water chip, right? It's
Yeah,
not like this one water chip that only exists in one place, I would
yeah.
imagine. Maybe I'm wrong.
I there might be. It's been years because that came out in like the 90s. Um, but as you
Ancient.
progress, yeah. So the cool thing with the Fallout games, and I think this is just good storytelling, and it happens as this TV show, like the Fallout series, continues past the pilot, is you raise the stakes, which is just a staple. And it's a young screenwriter staple, like raise the stakes. Because in the first Fallout game, which I think is the one that does it the best, you go out to find a water chip. As you go out to find the water chip, the mysteries of the wasteland start to become revealed to you. And you start to learn that there's a nefarious plot, like something is very wrong. And there's like mutants, there's all kinds of things that really shouldn't be, that don't make sense. And you learn that there's kind of like a mastermind behind what's going on. And the water chip failing was by design. And it was an experiment by Vault-Tec.
Yeah, that
And then yeah. But as you progress through the first Fallout game, it's revealed that there is something far more evil at work out there. And it's the master, and it's this whole interesting plot line, and it captures you. And that's why I think Fallout has progressed past, because the stakes were raised. And in
yeah,
the series, the same thing happens, but you learn a lot more about Vault-Tec. And Vault-Tec is awful.
yeah. Something that, oh no, I lost it. Ah!
Oh, that happens.
Yeah, it's all good. I'll either think of
Well,
it
I have a
or I
quick
won't.
question for you, Alexi.
Yeah.
So, with just the pilot of Fallout,
Mhm.
um, and we're kind of nearing the end of our conversation, what are like the main lessons or like inspirations that you take from this
Yeah.
adaptation?
So, actually, I remembered what it was, and it ties into your question well. I would say that out of the plot out of the video game adaptations that have succeeded, they have taken these games and given them a very important relationship that is at the core of the story, whether or not it was actually found in the original source material. So, in Fallout, obviously she's going after her dad. And that is like the core relationship there. But then you also have these other people that are clearly very passionate about their objectives for very personal reasons. So everything is made very personal. In The Last of Us, we spend an entire episode showing how love can exist in this apocalyptic place in order to create in order to show the importance of this like personal relationship that Joel had with Tess, so that when he loses it we understand that everything that he's doing is coming from a very personal place. It's his relationship to Tess and kind of
Right.
using that to build a relationship with Ellie. In Arcane, that was the one I saw the longest time ago, but I mean, they put the sister relationship at the very center. That is, like,
Mm.
one of the most important things. I think she's trying to, like, get back her sister or help her sister or something, and so, basically, they've taken these IP that might have some of these ideas in them already, and they've really pulled them to the forefront, and I think that
Mhm.
that is definitely one of the lessons that I have is that, honestly, the water chip thing is interesting, but at least right now, the stories that are and, like, for the last, like, 10 years, 15 years, the stories that are really, really grabbing people are more personal. It's more
Right.
about, like, I can see my relationship to my sibling in this, and, like, how would I feel if they were taken away from me, or how would I feel if a guardian was taken away from me, or, how would I feel if I lost the person that I love and they asked me to do this thing with, like, their dying breath. It's
Right.
all made very, very personal, and I think that that is definitely something that I would personally take from this is remembering that in addition to your objective being timely or tangible, important, timely, and specific, it should also be emotional. Like, it should also have, like, this personal touch to it that shows why it's important to the protagonist, but in a very personal way. It's not just like, "Oh, because I need to drink water to live." It's like, "Because I love this person," tends to be the thing that is compelling, I think. The power of love.
The power of love.
Yeah, but, like, truly, all 3 of those really have, like, love at the core of, like, why this person is going after their objective, and
Yeah.
I think that it helps ground it. Um And that's definitely something that I'm gonna keep in mind when when I'm thinking about adaptations, but also just when I'm thinking about objectives in general, is this idea that important means personally important, not just, like, survival
Right.
important, it's, like, emotionally important.
The
Um,
interpersonal relationships. Build
yeah,
upon that and build
and
your story.
love.
Yeah.
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 And then I think another thing that I would take from this is just really knowing your tone and leaning into it all the way and establishing it
Oh,
early
yeah.
on. Because this has like a very quirky humor that is very like a very dark quirky humor, and it gets obscenely graphic, like, like, in this pilot episode with, like, that one girl getting stabbed in the eye with a fork and, like, like, it's just very intense stuff, but they set that expectation early on, so when it happens, it still feels of the world. If they had, like, eased us into that, I don't know if it would have felt as good. It's like we need to understand up front that this is what we're getting, like, this is what we're here for,
Right.
is this dark sense of humor and this, like, over the top gruesome world. Um, so those
Mhm.
are my 2 takeaways, I would say.
Those are awesome takeaways. Now, this is the most important question. Has this inspired you to play the games at all?
No.
Well, it's funny you say that because apparently after the TV show came out, the sales for Fallout 4, which came out in 2016, so it's like an 8-year-old game, skyrocketed to the top of the chart.
I believe it, but, like,
So a lot of people were inspired to
I'm just, like,
play.
not a fan. I know that you can technically play it in third person, but it seems like a first person game to me, and I just really don't like first person games.
Mm.
And it's just I don't really like shooty games.
Well, then keep with the TV show.
I'm keeping with the TV show, and I'm playing another 2016 game, Dragon Age Inquisition.
Okay.
So,
Well, that's
yeah,
fun.
yeah, I'm curious. Apparently that has an adaptation, you told me too, so once I beat the game, I'm gonna check that out. But yeah, I think that, I totally get though why it would drive people to the games, and if I liked shooty games, it would probably inspire me too. But yeah, this was a fun conversation. It's really cool to kind of look at this new series. Something that we didn't get into that much, but something that I found fascinating is Amazon's choice to release it all in one big
Uh,
bingeable bucket rather
that's
than dripping it.
that's oh yeah, that's almost like a whole conversation on its own.
Which is wild to me. I honestly I know your opinion on it and that we're both kind of the same mind where it's like, you always say like, "God, why won't they just release it all at once?" But then when
Yeah.
they actually give it to you all at once, it's like having a bucket of ice cream for dinner. You're kinda like, "Why did I do this
Look,
to myself?" Like
look. I think just no matter what, like they could have dripped it and people probably would have been like, "Why didn't they just let us binge this?"
I know that no
Or,
one's ever gonna be happy.
no, no, the internet's never gonna be happy. But I will say with this in particular, like this could not have been a cheap series to make. I wonder why they didn't milk it. I don't know.
I think it's probably just a test, if I had to guess, because it's kinda like, everybody always says, "Oh, I wish they would release everything at once, so let's just give them everything at once and see how
Watch.
it goes."
So because this is being recorded, and so our listeners and viewers, uh, mark my words, season 2 will be dripped. They'll probably what they usually do on Amazon is they'll release the first 3 episodes, and then they, like, drip it to the finale.
See, I think that's
Um,
fine.
and with this one, they dropped it all once, obviously. I bet season 2, they're gonna do the 3, then drip, and
I
people are
hope
gonna
they
be
do.
mad. I bet people are gonna be
People
like,
are gonna be so pissed, I'll be
"What
pissed,
the
and I didn't even like when they dumped it all at once. I've honestly been
heck?"
watching at a slower pace than I would have if they came out week
Week
to
to week.
week because
Yeah.
there's no, like, there's
Well,
no FOMO in the
it
same way.
becomes like, "Oh, there's 8 hours of TV I could watch right now," instead of
Yeah,
just like, this 1 hour on Friday.
yeah, I agree. But I think overall it's a really interesting experiment, and I'm glad that somebody with a lot of money tried it out to see how that would go. But yeah, so I guess mandatory plug, if you're interested in learning more about writing pilots and kind of like the mechanics that we talked about today, um, the idea that your pilot episode at the midpoint, it's really the inciting incident of your season and just other little insights like that have been so helpful to me and that is so fun to see happening again and again in series. You can check out our course, Writing the Pilot. We'll include links in the description and everything. Um,
I do
but
wanna
yeah,
say real quick with writing the pilot, um, it is a comprehensive course developed by Alexie, Adam, and Theo that uses kind of the fundamentals from John Warren, who is involved here at Young Screenwriters, foundations of his classes at Tisch at NYU. Uh, and it is an incredible resource. So if you are looking to start your writing journey, or if you find yourself kind of hitting up against the wall during your writing process, then check out our courses. Because on top of writing the pilot, we also have 2 free courses, writing the scene and writing the short. So there's a lot here that to help you on your way in becoming a professional writer, and we would love to be part of that.
mhm. So hopefully you will tune in next week for more live conversations. And thank you so much for joining us, everybody.